The paper grocery bags pressed into the folds of my hands as I walked into the entryway. I had just finished a 10-hour shift at Ashcroft and Lyle Associates, skipped my meal break, but still managed to swing by Pinecrest Market for almond milk, olive oil, and the specific crackers that my mother always required. The corridor was filled with the scent of floor disinfectant mixed with fried onion. My shoes squeaked softly against the tiles. Nobody acknowledged me. I set the groceries on the kitchen counter and let out a breath. My wrists throbbed, and from behind me, my father's voice sounded sharply. "Did you see my message?" I pivoted halfway back. "About what?" He entered the kitchen, folding his arms, his expression tense. "Your mother and I have discussed things. If you're not going to start pitching in more, maybe you shouldn't be living here at all." For a split second, I wondered if I'd misunderstood him. Pitch in more. I had my own place, my career was going well, yet this home was sinking. My brother is still trying to sort things out. I'm no longer working. My mother is dealing with various health problems. I have been the one making the mortgage payments. I told them, "Be quiet. Utilities. Food from Pinecrest Market. Basically, everything." My brother shouted from the living room, his attention fixed on the TV. "She acts like she's doing us some big service or something." My fingers clenched tightly around the bag's rim. The crackers inside shifted, almost causing the bottom to split. My eyes flicked to the receipt still creased in my pocket. 1562. All spent for their sake. "I'm not pretending," I replied. My tone stayed steady. "I'm actually the one who's been handling things." My father set his jaw in frustration. "Don't start making a scene." My mother appeared in the doorway, arms folded like a judge's final decision. "We just need everyone to pitch in equally. I've already done more than my share. So then, why does it seem like you're still keeping something back?" I felt my chest stiffen into something heavy and cold. I released my grip on the bag, letting it drop to the floor. The counter made a muted sound as I set it down. I told them I had just finished my shift. "But all right," I continued. "If you want more, I'll give you something." Their eyes were fixed on me, as if expecting me to break down in tears or shout, but I did neither. I walked over to the entrance, opened the door, and before leaving, I spoke in a low voice. "Then this house no longer has a daughter named Sierra Whitaker." I was brought up to think that reliability and being loved were one and the same. If others could rely on me, it meant I was important. When I met their expectations, it felt like I truly fit in. At first, it was just little things. When I was 17, I paid a utility bill for the first time. My mother had once again overdrawn the account by mistake. I spent some of the money I earned at Pinecrest Market to make sure the electricity stayed on. She kissed me on the forehead and told me, "You're such a good girl. You'll always take care of us." Those words ended up setting the course for my life. By the time I turned 26, I was already handling most of the household expenses. I paid for the Wi-Fi, water, and the majority of groceries before anyone even asked me to. By the time I was 29, I had begun to send money for my parents' car insurance, and then, without fuss, settled my brother's overdraft charges. Each holiday season, my brother received a new phone. I, however, still used the same one I'd had for 5 years. When my father's medication wasn't covered during a particular month, I took time from my lunch break to drive across town and pick it up. No one paid me back. Nobody volunteered to help. Supporting one another is what family does. My mother would remind me, then send another list of tasks. I was never one to ask for many things. I didn't crave gifts or constant affirmation. All I wanted was to feel recognized, to have my efforts noticed as more than just the family's support beam. Yet it wasn't until I began tracking everything that I understood how much I had actually given. One evening, 10 days before tax filing, I sat down with my laptop and started a spreadsheet. I recorded every financial outlay from the previous 7 months: rent, food, vehicle maintenance, minimum payments on credit cards, loans I had co-signed, even my brother's counseling invoices, which I hadn't realized I was still responsible for. On every entry, there was a date, a reason, and a sum listed. The total at the bottom amounted to $1,359,800. I gazed at that figure for quite a while. It wasn't because I thought they'd reimburse me, but because I had to face it directly. I needed a clear reckoning with reality. In their eyes, I wasn't the daughter. I was simply their backup plan. I printed off the document, stuck it up over my desk in my small one-bedroom place, and kept it to myself. That sheet wasn't meant for anyone else. Its purpose was to serve me, a silent nudge to remind myself that my feelings weren't exaggerated, that it hadn't been just a handful of occasions, and that I had every right to feel exhausted. That evening, I brewed some tea and took in my surroundings. My apartment felt quiet, perhaps a bit too quiet, but I reminded myself I had to acclimate, since silence, unlike duty, doesn't expect anything in return. The rental agreement was for a brief period. The carpet showed signs of age, and the walls had an indescribable beige hue, but the apartment belonged solely to me. When I arrived, I brought just 2 suitcases, my coffee machine, and a bookshelf I spent an hour assembling all by myself. Nobody came to help, yet for the first time, I wasn't hurt by their absence. What was missing felt more like space to inhale, space to simply be. I would receive messages every other day. Messages from my mother arrived long and meandering, heavy with guilt. Messages from my father were short. Call your mother. Have you checked the mail? My brother reached out only when something went wrong, almost always followed by a Venmo request. I never blocked any of them. I simply disabled all alerts and let the quiet stretch between us like a ribbon. I was learning a new language, one where I no longer had to turn my tiredness into politeness. These days, my account notifications sounded less frequently. No more money transfers, no hurried deposits to cover overdrafts that weren't my fault. I went back to monitoring my own expenses, little purchases like soothing herbal teas, a fresh shower curtain, and food chosen only for my own tastes. When evening came, I cooked dinner for myself. I made real dishes, no frozen items, and nothing rushed. While I prepared my meal, I put on gentle music. I stopped looking at my phone during these moments. There was no anxiety about what might appear on my screen. Sometimes I simply lay in bed, listening to the steady whir of the ceiling fan. For the first time in years, my body didn't feel like it was waiting for a disaster. There would be no sudden knocks at the door. Nobody would burst in uninvited. No one was relying on me for anything. For the first time, I began to sleep soundly through the night. I finally got full, uninterrupted rest. 9 hours of sleep replaced my usual 8 or 10 on weekends. There weren't any cheers, nobody watching, only the gentle hush of piecing my life back together, breath after breath. I left the spreadsheet sitting on my desk most days, rarely opening it anymore. The numbers didn't need to be in front of me to remind me of what I already knew. Space between us had accomplished what face-to-face confrontation never had. That time apart allowed me to stop putting on an act. One Monday evening, I glanced at the forecast and chose to walk to work. The cool air felt sincere. It didn't require anything from me. It made no requests for my gratitude or for me to yield. So when my phone vibrated with yet another message from 37 Maplewood Drive, I didn't react. I simply tucked the device back into my bag and continued on. It had been 5 years since I left. 4 weeks filled with peaceful meals, 9-hour nights of sleep, and checking my own bank balance without bracing myself. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, just as I crossed into Brookridge Tower, my phone vibrated with a text from my father. Why didn't the card go through? No greeting or punctuation. Just 7 words, as if I'd skipped a shift at a job I never asked for. I chose not to respond. I didn't even pause my stride. I set my phone face down on my desk and poured myself coffee like I would on any ordinary day. Around midday, my brother started calling. After I ignored him, he kept dialing back repeatedly. On his 4th call, I finally answered. I decided I deserved to hear just how far they would push this. "You knew we needed that money," my brother snapped. Before I could get a single word out, I chose to remain silent. "You think you can just stop helping and nothing changes? You believe you're better than us just because you have some tiny place listed in a spreadsheet?" Again, I kept quiet. He hung up with a scoff full of frustration. Not even a farewell. That evening, I powered up my laptop and accessed the public real estate records through the bank's website. I entered the location for 37 Maplewood Drive, the home from my childhood. Pre-foreclosure. Final warning posted. There was no sting in my chest. My fingers remained steady. I simply looked at the display. Not shocked. More numb than anything. For almost a year, I'd been wiring $1,070 a month. Occasionally, I'd transfer even larger sums. The actual loan documents never passed before my eyes. They never presented them to me. My intention had been to help. I believed I was preventing disaster. But it was obvious now. The funds hadn't gone toward the mortgage. They were redirected somewhere else. I exited the browser tab. The specifics didn't matter to me. The reality spoke for itself. My parents hadn't needed a daughter. What they wanted was a mechanism. And that mechanism had just failed. I fetched a glass of water and settled onto the floor by my small table. No sound, no background music. They would frantically shift blame now, making me feel guilty, twisting my quiet into some act of selfishness. Still, I was no longer part of that dynamic. I wasn't the safety net catching them whenever they stumbled. I had stepped aside and let consequences fall where they may. My phone blinked to life again, this time displaying my mother's name. I let it ring without answering until it finally stopped. I had no intention of returning her call. I had practiced holding on to quiet like it was my protection, but something about receiving that last foreclosure notice finally pushed me to act. Not from anger, but from closure. I waited until Saturday morning. That was always how it was when they were at home. My father would be watching sports, my mother folding laundry while the television played, and my brother making a show of searching for work. I called the landline to 37 Maplewood Drive. The phone rang twice. "Hello?" My mother's voice sounded gentle but fragile. "Put me on speaker," I requested. There was a hesitation. Then I heard the low tone of the speakerphone activating. Beyond her voice, I could hear the recognizable squeak of the kitchen chair, the pop of a soda can, and the shuffling of papers filling the room. "I'm here," my father said. "Same," my brother replied quietly. I drew in a single measured breath. "Where did the money go?" I asked. Silence fell between us. "What?" my mother responded, as if she hadn't caught my question. "I transferred $1,170 every month for almost a year," I said. "I checked the mortgage. It's in foreclosure, which is why I'm asking what happened to the money." My mother cleared her throat. "Your father had to get dental work done. Then the water heater broke, and my brother's car needed fixing. Plus grocery bills got out of hand," my mother explained, sounding strained. "It's been a lot," she finished. My brother jumped in. "You talk like we blew it all on a trip," he said. "Life happened, and we were planning to straighten it out." My father added, "We weren't trying to hide anything from you. We just got overwhelmed." I kept my voice steady, not yelling, not even sighing. "You never showed me any bills, never checked if I could handle it, never once offered to ask for repayment. You simply expected me to take care of it." In a subdued tone, my mother began to speak. "We're family," she said, "so there shouldn't be any need for a contract." I gave a small nod to myself. That was exactly the problem. I didn't have a contract. My name wasn't listed on the deed. I didn't even truly have a seat at the table unless I contributed something. Nobody said a word. I've gone through the emails and listened to the voicemails. People have described me as cold, self-centered, and dramatic. But those words don't define me. I was your daughter. You made me into your provider. I heard a deep exhale on the other line. After a moment, my father spoke in a strained, quiet voice. "You don't get it," he said. "Without your help, we're losing everything." Staring out my window, I watched a humble tree sway outside my apartment. "No," I replied softly. "Everything was lost the instant you began viewing me as just a spreadsheet." I tapped the end call button, not out of anger, not because I felt a sense of satisfaction, one that required no recognition or approval from anyone else. I set my phone face down on the table, then reached for the unopened envelope addressed to me with my parents' return information. The envelope felt flimsier than I had anticipated. Tucked inside was a final warning, with words like delinquent, default, and eviction proceedings printed in bold type. Even though my name never appeared on the deed, the letter still found its way to me. It was almost as if they wanted me to read it, needing me to experience one last pang of guilt. I folded the letter in half, then again, and tore it down the center. Not in anger. There was no lingering frustration left for me, just a calm realization that this burden was never mine to shoulder. It had never belonged to me. I pulled up our old group message. The conversation went back for years. There were snapshots of birthday cakes I'd paid for, as well as receipts from Pinecrest Market. Trips. Thinly veiled emojis meant to convey annoyance. Curt, unemotional requests. I kept scrolling on my phone until my thumb began to ache. After that, I stopped. Just a single sentence. "I refuse to be your fallback anymore. Farewell." I hit send. I exited the group chat. Next, I blocked every one of them. My mother, my father, my brother. My phone became motionless. It wasn't quiet, just unmoving. A hush implied anticipation. A lack of movement meant acceptance. I exited the banking app I'd left running and opened a second one, created exclusively for myself. I'd started that account a few months earlier, uncertain whether I'd ever actually need it. There was no paycheck connected, no outgoing transfers, only small deposits building up to today. I visited Juniper Leaf Boutique, the little shop I regularly passed during my commute, the kind of store I'd always considered unnecessarily extravagant. As I stepped inside, I tried on some buttery soft leather shoes. They were a perfect fit. I purchased them outright, no promotions applied, and no sense of remorse. Stepping back onto the street, I didn't feel like I was fleeing from anything. Instead, I felt as though I was finally coming back to my true self. Later that night, I prepared a simple meal just for myself. I poured a glass of wine and lit a candle I'd been saving since last Christmas. The flame burned calmly, almost as though it understood that something conclusive had taken place. The spreadsheet was still tacked above my desk, but I realized I didn't rely on it anymore. What marked the boundary wasn't the figures. It existed in the breaths I could now take freely, without hesitation. People might label it betrayal, abandonment, or selfishness. I was fine with that. I had devoted my hours, my income, and my strength until I had nothing left to give. Now I had offered up one more thing, a decisive farewell, and the emptiness it left behind was shaped perfectly like peace. While I curled up on the sofa with my new shoes resting by the entrance, I launched a fresh browser tab on my laptop, the kind I hadn't dared to open in many years, and I began looking up flights. The dining table was small, yet it easily held everything we needed. There was a crock pot full of lentils, a familiar spinach dip, and pieces of cornbread that were still warm inside their foil wrapping. From the kitchen, I could hear laughter as Kayla and Mason playfully argued about who made a superior chili. I quietly placed my dish in the middle, homemade lemon bars that I'd baked myself. It had been ages since I last hosted, not out of inability, but mostly because it simply never crossed my mind that people might come over expecting nothing but a place in a shared memory. We sat on the ground with our legs crossed, plates propped on newspaper napkins that were folded just enough to seem intentional. It felt cozy, not only because of the apartment's temperature, but also because of the effortless, genuine atmosphere. During the evening, someone asked me why I never mentioned my family. Their tone was relaxed and not intrusive, more out of interest than anything else. I hesitated for a moment before grinning. "Some stories are better closed," I said. Nobody insisted. Everyone simply nodded and continued with our meal. That evening, once the dishes were washed and all the laughter had dissolved into the gentle background noise of my apartment, I fixed myself a mug of chamomile tea and settled by the window. The rosemary growing in the planter next to me had finally begun to break through the soil. Although the leaves were still tiny, their scent was potent whenever I rubbed them between my fingers. I had begun planting things in early summer, expanding beyond herbs into routines. Every Saturday, I visited Briar Hollow Farm Stand. Each Thursday afternoon, I attended a yoga class. Some days before work, I would take a walk without looking at my phone. In the quiet spaces between activities, I drafted lists, books I hoped to read, and destinations I was eager to see. Oregon always headed those lists. I was a stranger to everyone there. That, in fact, was exactly what I was after. It seemed like the sort of place where the quiet would be picturesque, not empty. The funds I had once transferred to help rescue someone else's house were now steadily paving the way for a life that belonged solely to me. Planning a getaway alone, buying a fresh jacket, or upgrading my bed, these were things I could do without needing anyone's approval. I used to associate home with family ties, shared living spaces, and mutual responsibilities, but now my understanding had changed. Home, to me, had become a place where I could inhale freely. I found it in the rosemary plant sitting on my windowsill, in the message from my friend Kayla requesting my lemon bar recipe, and in the gentle whir of a ceiling fan untouched by anxiety or demands. It lay in the tranquil pause that followed after everyone had left, when nothing seemed out of place. That evening, I took a blank sheet of paper, folded it, and began my list with the words "packing list" at the top.